Welcome in, everybody. We're going to take a deep dive today into the life and career of Marianne Faithfull. She recently passed away at the age of 78. Marianne Faithfull, legendary pop star and survivor, dies at 78 and was published just a few days ago on January 31st, 2025. And, looking at this article, it's clear that her story is anything but a typical celebrity open.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Marianne led such an incredible life, full of, really high highs and really low lows. She was so much more than just a, pop star. She was a survivor, an artist, and she constantly reinvented herself.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes her story so compelling. So let's start with some background for anyone who might not be as familiar with her work. Marianne Faithfull first kind of burst onto the music scene in the 1960s, and her early hit, As Tears Go By, which was a beautifully melancholic ballad written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. That song really catapulted her to fame when she was barely even out of her teens.
Yeah, As Tears Go By really captured like the mood of the time. This kind of wistful yearning to it. And it's interesting because I think it foreshadowed some of the emotional depth that would later come to define Marianne's music.
Right, and speaking of foreshadowing, her relationship with Mick Jagger during that era, became a huge part of her story. And it's impossible to talk about Marianne Faithfull without acknowledging that connection. But, what's so fascinating is how she ultimately transcended the label of Mick Jagger's muse and really carved out her own unique path as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And her journey was not, easy. The article really doesn't shy away from the darker periods of her life, addiction, homelessness. She even had a suicide attempt. And these weren't just, tabloid fodder. These were real struggles that she had to face head on.
It's heartbreaking to think about everything that she went through. And the public's perception of her during those times was often so harsh and judgmental. But what's remarkable is that she emerged from all of that darkness, stronger and more determined than ever. And her artistic reinvention in the 1970s was really nothing short of extraordinary.
It really was. I mean, she completely shed that early pop image and embraced a much more raw and gritty sound. Her 1979 album, Broken English, is a perfect example of this transformation. It's a masterpiece of vulnerability and strength. And it's got these elements of punk and rock and spoken word in it.
And that album came, right on the heels of a really difficult period for her. You can hear the pain and the resilience in every note.
Yeah, Why Do You Do It is a great example of that. It's on that album, Broken English, is this really searing indictment of infidelity. Her vocal delivery is just raw, almost primal. And the lyrics are so brutally honest, exploring themes of, betrayal and anger and just the complexities of desire.
It's such a powerful track. And to think she was singing about, these really raw emotions at a time when women, especially women in the public eye, were often expected to present a much more, polished and perfect image. But she refused to be silenced or to conform to those expectations.
She was bold. And it resonated with so many people who felt similarly marginalized or misunderstood. Marianne was never afraid to show her scars.
Yeah.
Both literally and figuratively. And by doing so, she challenged the very notion of what it meant to be a female artist in that era.
Right, and her story didn't end there. In addition to music, she also explored acting. She was in films like The Girl on a Motorcycle, and even a stage production of Hamlet where she played Ophelia.
Yeah, what's interesting is that a lot of those acting roles often reflected the complexity and depth of her own life. They weren't just superficial performances. They were opportunities for her to really explore different facets of the human experience.
Right, and she wasn't afraid to take on challenging roles that pushed her out of our comfort zone. This willingness to experiment and to evolve continued throughout her entire career. She later collaborated with a diverse range of artists, from PJ Harvey to Nick Cave, and it further demonstrates her enduring appeal and her ability to connect with different generations of musicians.
Yeah, those collaborations speak volumes about the respect that she earned from her peers. They recognized her talent, her unique voice, and her unwavering commitment to artistic expression.
Absolutely. And amidst all of this, she also faced some significant health challenges. She battled breast cancer and hepatitis C, but even in the face of those setbacks, she never lost her spirit or her drive to create.
No, she didn't. It's a testament to her incredible resilience. She didn't let those challenges define her. She kept creating, kept pushing boundaries, and kept inspiring others with her strength and her vulnerability. It's amazing how Marianne really embodies this idea of transformation and reinvention. She wasn't afraid to shed her skin musically and personally, and that often meant challenging how the public saw her.
Yeah, that's true. She wasn't afraid to evolve and become something different than what people expected her to be. Her early image was very much tied to that swinging 60s scene. But she didn't let that define her.
Exactly. She was always pushing boundaries. And if we look at her work with artists like PJ Harvey and Nick Cave, they're both known for their raw and sometimes dark styles. It shows how she was always exploring new sounds and challenging herself creatively.
And these weren't just, random pairings. There was a real sense of kinship there, a shared artistic sensibility in those collaborations. It speaks to her ability to connect with artists who, like her, weren't afraid to explore those darker, more complex parts of human experience.
Right. She had a way of finding kindred spirits. And those collaborations, they weren't just about the music. They were about breaking boundaries and making something really unique and groundbreaking.
It's interesting because her later work, while it is often, dark and introspective, it also has this incredible sense of hope and resilience. It's like she was saying, yeah, life can be painful and messy, but you can still find beauty in the darkness.
That's a great point. She wasn't afraid to acknowledge the darkness, but she always seemed to find that glimmer of light within it. It's what makes her music so powerful and enduring.
So we've talked a lot about her struggles and her transformation, but what about her legacy? What do you think she'll be remembered for?
I think her authenticity, her fearlessness, and her commitment to artistic expression. She never compromised her vision, even when it meant criticism or rejection.
She definitely didn't play it safe. She pushed boundaries and challenged the status quo, both in her music and her life. And I think that resonates with people, especially artists, who are trying to find their own voice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She was a trailblazer.
Yeah.
She paved the way for other artists, especially women, to be more honest and vulnerable in their work.
And to be more experimental, more willing to take risks and defy expectations. Think about how bold it was for her to move away from that early pop sound and embrace a much rawer, grittier style.
It was a bold move.
Mm-hmm.
It challenged how the industry thought a female artist should be. He wasn't afraid to break the mold and create something totally her own.
And she did it on her own terms. It's like she was saying, I'm not going to let you define me, I'm going to define myself.
Exactly. She took control of her own narrative and refused to be put in a box. That's a powerful message for women in the music industry.
And she was doing all of this at a time when the music industry was even more male-dominated than it is now. So she faced a lot of challenges and barriers, but she never let that stop her.
She was a true pioneer. She challenged the status quo and paved the way for other women.
And she did it with style and grace. She was a true icon musically and culturally.
What stands out to you about her legacy? What resonates the most?
Her ability to connect with people on such a deep emotional level. Her music is so raw and honest. It's like she's bearing her soul. And that vulnerability is incredibly powerful.
I agree. There's a rawness and authenticity that really pulls you in. It's like she's inviting you into her world, sharing her joys and sorrows, her triumphs and failures.
And it's not just her music, her entire life story. She went through so much darkness and pain, but she always came out stronger, more resilient.
Marianne never gave up. Even when she was up against these huge challenges, she always found a way to put those experiences into her art.
She turned her pain into power, her vulnerability into strength.
And because of that, she inspired so many others to do the same.
Her willingness to be open about her struggles was groundbreaking, especially back then when those things were often stigmatized.
Totally. She helped to destigmatize addiction and mental health issues and the struggles of being a woman in a male-dominated industry.
She gave a voice to the voiceless, or maybe a melody to the unspoken.
That's a great way to put it, and that's a legacy that will keep resonating for years to come.
So we've covered a lot, from her early fame to her addiction, her artistic changes, and her legacy. Marianne Faithfull's life was full of so many different experiences. But even in the chaos, you can feel this purpose and resilience.
It's both tragic and triumphant, heartbreaking and inspiring. In the end, it's a story about how powerful the human spirit is to overcome anything and create beauty out of the broken pieces.
Well said. We've definitely unpacked a lot here, and I'm excited to hear your final thoughts on Marianne's legacy as we wrap up this deep dive. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Marianne Faithfull's life and legacy, what are your final thoughts? What does her story teach us?
I keep coming back to the power of authenticity and vulnerability.
We've talked about those ideas, but can you expand on that a little?
Sure, Marianne never backed down from the tough or uncomfortable parts of life. She owned her flaws, her struggles, her pain, and she made them part of her art.
Yeah, that realness is definitely a big part of her music, especially her later work.
Exactly. And that's what I think makes her so relatable and so powerful as an artist. In a world where we're always being told to look perfect, Marianne just dared to be real. She showed us it's okay to be vulnerable, to not be perfect, to just be human.
And by doing that, she made space for other people to feel seen and heard.
Exactly. Her honesty and vulnerability made this connection with her listeners that went beyond just the music. She became this symbol of resilience, like proof that you could overcome anything and come out stronger.
It's like she gave everyone permission to embrace their imperfections and find beauty in the broken pieces.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's such a powerful message, especially now when we're always seeing these images of perfection and success. Marianne reminded us that it's okay to not be okay, and that our struggles can actually be a source of strength and creativity.
So for someone who's just discovering Marianne Faithfull maybe through our deep dive today, where would you recommend they start with her music?
I'd say start with Broken English, the album from '79. It's a turning point in her career, and it really shows her transformation.
It's a powerful album for sure. Raw, honest, deeply personal.
And from there, I'd say check out her later albums like Strange Weather and Give My Love to London. They all have that blend of vulnerability, strength, and storytelling that she was known for.
Her voice changed over time too. It became richer and more textured.
Yeah, and her songwriting matured. Her lyrics got more haunting and insightful, reflecting everything she'd lived through.
So beyond the music, what do you think is the most important thing to remember about Marianne Faithfull?
I think it's that reminder that life is a journey with ups and downs, twists and turns. It's how we handle the challenges that really defines us. And Marianne, she faced a lot of adversity, but she never gave up on herself or her art. She kept creating, kept evolving, kept inspiring others with her courage and her authenticity.
She was truly one of a kind, and her story will continue to resonate for years to come. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into the extraordinary life and legacy of Marianne Faithfull.